The scrapyard secret: the night was cold, and the scrapyard was silent. Broken ships stood like skeletons, their metal bones shining under the dim light of the moon. The air smelled of rust, smoke, and forgotten lives. Among the piles of junk and twisted machines, there was a faint sound almost too soft to notice. It was not the sound of metal, not the sound of wind, but the weak breath of someone left behind. In the middle of the scrapyard, between a broken shuttle and a pile of old engines, lay a young alien girl. Her skin was pale with glowing lines across her arms, but her body did not move. Her legs were twisted and useless, her arms weak, her eyes half closed. She could not walk, she could not run, she could not even sit up. Her family had carried her here earlier that day, and they had left her with cold voices. "You are broken, you are useless, you only take food. You give nothing." They had pushed her onto the metal ground and walked away without looking back. Now she lay alone, her heart heavy, her eyes full of silent tears. She whispered in the dark, "Please, not like this." Not alone, but no one answered. The scrapyard was not a place for mercy. It was a place where machines came to die, and sometimes so did people. The night grew colder. She tried to move, but her body betrayed her. Every effort brought pain. Every breath felt like fire. She thought maybe this was the end. Maybe her family was right. Maybe no one would care if she vanished among the junk. Her eyes began to close, ready to surrender. But then footsteps echoed, slow and heavy. A man entered the scrapyard, his boots crunching against broken glass and gravel. He wore a torn jacket, his face covered with dust. His eyes sharp and tired. He was human. A scavenger who came here often to look for parts to sell. His life was not easy, and every night was a fight for survival. But tonight, his search would uncover something more than old machines. He carried a lantern made from a glowing core. The light moved across piles of scrap until it stopped on a pair of glowing alien eyes staring back at him from the shadows. He froze, thinking maybe it was an animal, maybe a trick of light, but then the eyes blinked, and a faint whisper came out, "Please, don't go." The human's breath caught. He moved closer, careful, his hand resting near the tool strapped to his belt. And then he saw her, the alien girl lying in the dirt, paralyzed, weak, shaking in the cold. Her face was young, her features soft, but her condition was painful to look at. She looked like someone who had been left behind on purpose. The man crouched down, staring at her. His heart told him to help, but his mind warned him. Helping her would mean trouble. Maybe enemies, maybe danger. She could be a trap, or worse, she could bring hunters to him. Still, when he looked into her eyes, he saw not danger, but pure desperation. Eyes of someone who had already been abandoned by the world. She tried to lift her hand, but it fell back to the ground. Her voice trembled. "They left me here, please." "Don't leave too," her words cut deep, heavier than any weight he had carried before. The human swallowed hard. He thought of walking away, of pretending he had seen nothing. But his boots would not move. Something inside him refused. Something very human. The belief that no one deserved to die alone in the dark. He took off his old jacket and placed it gently over her frail body. Her eyes widened, a small spark of life returning. The warmth of the cloth was not much, but to her it felt like a shield. She whispered, Why are you helping me?" His answer was quiet but strong, because no one else did. The scrapyard around them felt different now. The silence was no longer empty, it was filled with a choice. One human, one broken alien girl, and the shadow of a world that had already abandoned her. The night was not over, the danger was not gone, but a secret bond had begun in the scrapyard, one that neither of them fully understood yet. And as he lifted her gently into his arms, the girl closed her eyes and breathed for the first time without fear. For in that moment she was no longer abandoned. The scrapyard was silent except for the distant howl of wind. The human stood frozen, the paralyzed alien girl still lying weak under his jacket. His hands shook as he looked down at her glowing eyes. They begged for life, for hope, for someone not to walk away, and in his chest, a storm began. One voice telling him to run, another whispering to stay. He had lived long enough to know how dangerous mercy could be. The galaxy was not kind, and acts of kindness often came with a price. He remembered the last time he tried to help someone. He had almost lost everything still. As he looked at her small frame, broken and fragile, he knew leaving her would burn his soul forever. The girl coughed weakly, her voice little more than air. "They said I'm useless, broken, I don't deserve to live." The words hit him harder than any blow. He clenched his fists, anger rising, not at her, but at the cruelty that had abandoned her. But anger did not change the fact that she was helpless and he was just a poor scavenger. He whispered to himself, "What am I doing here? This is not my fight." Yet his feet would not move away. Instead, he crouched lower, brushing dirt from her face. Her skin was cold, her breath shallow, and he knew if he left she would not see the morning. He thought about food. He had little, barely enough for himself. He thought about safety. Taking her home could invite enemies. Her family might not want her saved. He thought about his life, already hard, already broken, and now standing on the edge of becoming worse. Everything inside his mind screamed, "Walk away," but everything inside his heart whispered, "Stay." The girl's hand twitched, trying to hold on to his jacket. Her voice cracked as she spoke, "Please, even if it's just for one night, don't leave me here." Her words were like chains, pulling him closer, binding him in a way no weapon ever could. He sat on the ground beside her, his lantern casting long shadows on rusted ships. The scrapyard around them looked alive, as if listening, waiting for his decision. For a long moment he said nothing, only staring at the stars above through broken metal frames. Finally, he whispered, "I don't have much, I don't have power. I don't even have a reason, but I can't leave you here." He slid his arms under her frail body. She was lighter than he expected. Bones thin, body shaking. As he lifted her, she gasped, not from pain but from shock. No one had carried her in years. No one had cared. Tears rolled down her face as she whispered, "Why? Why would you do this?" His answer was simple, "Because I can." He started walking slowly through the scrapyard, her head resting weakly against his chest. The night was colder now, and shadows seemed to move in every corner. He felt the weight of danger pressing closer, as if unseen eyes were watching. Maybe her family, maybe scavenger gangs, maybe worse. Carrying her was no longer just an act of mercy. It was a risk, a choice that could change everything. As he walked, his mind battled itself. He remembered the jobs he could lose, the people who might come after him. He thought about the hunger that would grow if he shared his food. He thought about the nights he already spent fighting for survival. But then he looked at her, a girl abandoned to rot like junk, and he thought, what is the point of surviving if I can't save even one life? The scrapyard gates appeared ahead, broken and bent. Each step felt heavier, as if his choice was dragging not only her but his entire fate. He paused, standing still, the cold night air sharp against his face. He whispered one last time, almost asking himself, "Am I ready for this?" The girl's trembling hand clutched his sleeve, her eyes begging silently. And that was his answer. He walked forward past the gate, past the place where she had been left to die. Every step was a rebellion against the cruelty that abandoned her. Every step was a promise that he would not turn back. The scrapyard behind him faded into silence, but inside his heart a fire had been lit. The human knew this was not the end but the beginning. Danger would follow, questions would rise, enemies would come. But he also knew something else. Sometimes one choice, one act of mercy, could change not just one life but the course of destiny itself. And as the girl rested in his arms, whispering with the last of her strength, "Thank you," he realized the dilemma was over. The decision made, he would not walk away no matter the cost. The road outside the scrapyard was dark, lit only by a pale moon and the human's lantern. He carried the paralyzed alien girl in his arms, every step heavy but steady. Her head rested against his chest, her breath weak but calmer now under the warmth of his jacket. For the first time in a long while, she was not lying in cold dirt. She was not alone, still her body shook, her fear not yet gone. The human walked through broken streets, past ruins of old machines and fallen towers. His mind was heavy with questions. What if someone saw him? What if her family returned? What if taking her home brought danger? But when he looked down at her fragile face, he knew turning back was no longer possible. He whispered under his breath, "Just a little further. You'll be safe soon." They reached his small shelter at the edge of the ruined district. It was not much, only broken walls, patched with metal and a weak fire burning in a drum. But for him, it had always been enough, and now it would have to be enough for two. He pushed the old door open with his shoulder and stepped inside, placing her gently on a blanket spread near the fire. The girl looked around with wide eyes. It was no palace, no warm house, just a scavenger's home, but to her, after the cold scrapyard, it felt like a different world. She whispered, "It's warm." The human nodded, crouching beside her. "It's not much, but it will keep you alive." He took a small flask of water and lifted it to her lips. At first she hesitated, but then her thirst won. She drank slowly, each sip giving her a little strength. Her eyes softened as she whispered, "I thought no one would come. I thought I would die there." Her voice cracked and tears slid down her cheeks. The human's chest tightened. He had seen broken machines, ruined cities, even corpses, but nothing cut him as deeply as her tears. He opened a tin box and pulled out a small piece of bread, hard and dry. It was his last piece. Saved for himself, but without thinking, he broke it in half and gave her the larger part. She stared at it, her hands trembling. "For me?" He nodded. "You need it more than I do." Her lips shook as she took the bread, her glowing eyes wet with disbelief. No one had ever given her food before without anger, without insult, without telling her she was a burden. This was her first real kindness, and it felt like a miracle. She ate slowly, small bites, as if afraid the food would vanish if she hurried. The human watched silently, his own stomach empty, but his heart strangely full. In that moment, he realized something. Helping her was not a burden. It was a choice that gave him purpose, something he had not felt in years. After eating, the girl leaned back, her face calmer. Though exhaustion still pulled at her eyes, she whispered, "Why are you doing this, human? You don't know me. You don't owe me anything." He looked at her for a long moment before answering. "I don't need a reason to help. Sometimes, not walking away is enough." Silence filled the small room, broken only by the soft crackle of the fire. But it was not a heavy silence. It was gentle, like the quiet after a storm. The girl closed her eyes for a moment, whispering something so faint he almost missed it. "My name is Sira." The human blinked, realizing she had just trusted him with something personal. He nodded slowly. "Sira, you're safe here now." For the first time, her lips curved into the smallest, weakest smile, but a smile nonetheless. Yet even as she rested, shadows stirred outside. A distant noise echoed, voices in the night, metal scraping against stone. The human froze, moving to the window, his hand tightening on the rusty tool he kept as a weapon. Through the cracks, he saw figures moving near the street, scavenger gangs searching, their eyes sharp, their weapons shining in the dark. He whispered to himself, "They can't see her. They can't know she's here." Turning back to the girl, he placed a finger gently to his lips, signaling silence. Her eyes widened with fear, but she trusted him, staying still. The fire flickered. Shadows danced on the wall, and the footsteps outside grew closer. The human's heart pounded. His first act of kindness had saved her from the scrapyard, but now it had also put them both in danger. As the night stretched on, one thing became clear. Kindness was never simple in this world. It was a choice that demanded sacrifice. And soon, the cost of that choice would be tested. The night outside was no longer quiet. The human stood near the cracked window, his eyes locked on the shadows moving in the ruined street. Figures walked slowly, whispering to each other, their boots heavy on broken stone. They carried weapons made from scrap metal and stolen tech, sharp and deadly scavenger gangs, dangerous and cruel, searching for something or someone. Inside the small shelter, the fire crackled softly, throwing weak light on the walls. The paralyzed alien girl, Sira, lay under the old jacket, her glowing eyes wide with fear. She could hear the footsteps, the low voices, and her heart pounded. Her family had left her to rot, but they had not wanted anyone else to take her. If they learned she was alive, they would not forgive the human for saving her. The human clenched his rusty tool like a blade. His jaw tight, he whispered to Sira, "Stay silent, no matter what happens." She nodded weakly, clutching the blanket around her body, her breath shaking. Every second stretched long, the air inside heavy with tension. One of the gang members stopped right outside the shelter. The man's voice was harsh. Someone saw a scavenger carrying something from the scrapyard. "Maybe a machine, maybe more, check the houses." Another voice laughed cruelly. "Or maybe he picked up trash, who cares? Still worth a look?" Their footsteps drew closer, boots scraping against the dirt. The human's heart thudded louder. If they stepped inside, they would see her. And there would be no escape. He moved quickly, pulling a broken sheet of metal to cover the fire. Dimming the glow, darkness swallowed the room, leaving only silence. Outside, the voices grew louder, the sound of hands banging against nearby doors. Searching, Sierra's breathing quickened, panic rising in her chest. The human crouched beside her, his rough hand gently pressing against her trembling fingers. "Quiet," he mouthed, his own breathing steady despite the storm in his chest. For a moment she stared at him and something inside her calmed. If he was not afraid, maybe she could hold her fear too. The door rattled suddenly. One of the scavengers pushed against it. Testing the lock, the wood creaked but held. Another voice muttered, "Nothing here, just an old shack." "Then move." "We don't have all night," the leader snapped. Footsteps shifted, fading slowly. But the human did not relax until the last echo of their voices disappeared into the distance. When silence returned, Sierra finally let out the breath she had been holding. Her eyes filled with tears. They were looking for me." The human shook his head. "No, they were looking for anything they could steal, but if they find you, yes, it will be worse." His voice was heavy, not with fear but with certainty. He knew the gangs did not leave things undone. If they suspected, they would return, and next time, the door would not hold. He sat back against the wall, his tool still in his hand, his mind racing. He could not keep her here. His small shelter was no fortress. Sooner or later someone would come, and once word spread that a scavenger had carried something strange out of the scrapyard, everyone would know. The pursuit had already begun, and now it was only a matter of time before danger closed in. Sierra whispered softly, "You should let me go. If I stay, they will kill you too." The human looked at her sharply, anger flashing in his eyes. "I didn't pull you out of the scrapyard just to throw you back." His voice softened after a moment. "I don't walk away, remember?" Her lips trembled, a mix of fear and gratitude. She had never been defended before, never been worth protecting, but to him she was. The human rose and began gathering what little he owned. A bag of tools, a flask of water, a small piece of food. He spoke in a low, firm tone. "We can't stay here, it's not safe anymore. We move at dawn." Sierra stared at him, shocked. "Move? Where?" He glanced out the window at the dead city beyond. "Somewhere they won't find you. Somewhere better than this." That night he did not sleep. He sat near the door with his weapon in hand. His ears sharp to every sound, Sierra watched him quietly. Her body too weak to move, but her mind awake. For the first time she felt what it was like to be protected. Not abandoned, and though fear still clung to her, a new thought grew inside her heart. Maybe she was not useless. Maybe she was worth saving. When dawn broke, the ruins glowed under a pale sun. The human lifted her gently onto his back, securing her with a strap made from old cloth. She rested her head against him, whispering, "You'll be hunted for this," he answered with a small smile. "Then let them hunt." Together they stepped into the broken city. Behind them, the scavenger gangs whispered and searched, hungry for their prey. The pursuit had only just begun. But the human walked forward without fear. Carrying more than a broken girl, he carried a promise, one he would not break no matter who chased them. The ruined city stretched endless before them. Crumbling towers rose like broken teeth. Streets were silent except for the crunch of the human's boots. On his back, Sierra clung weakly, wrapped in his old jacket, her glowing eyes half closed. Every step was heavy, but he did not slow. He knew they had to keep moving. The scavenger gangs were out there, watching, waiting. The sun was pale, hidden behind thick clouds. The wind carried the stench of smoke and rust. It was a world of decay, yet in the middle of it, something fragile lived. The bond between one human and one abandoned alien girl. Hours passed, and the human paused near a collapsed wall. He lowered Sierra gently onto a blanket and handed her the flask of water. She drank slowly, whispering, "You should leave me. I'll only slow you down." His reply was firm. "I've already chosen and I don't turn back." But deep inside, he knew she was right. Carrying her made him slower, made him easier to track, and with scavengers closing in, one mistake could mean death for both. As if reading his thoughts, Sierra's eyes glowed faintly brighter. Her voice was soft, almost shy. I can help," the human frowned. "Help? You can't even walk." Her lips trembled, but she held his gaze. "Not with my body." With something else, he raised an eyebrow, unsure. But then she lifted a trembling hand and closed her eyes. The air around them shifted like invisible threads humming. The human felt a strange tingle across his skin. Then her voice came calm but strange. "They're close. 3 men to the east moving toward us." He froze, staring at her. "How do you know that?" She opened her eyes, glowing faintly. "I can sense energy." Machines, weapons, people. They all carry a spark. I can feel it. Before he could reply, a sharp noise echoed. A scavenger's whistle in the distance. The human cursed under his breath, pulling her back onto his shoulders. Then guide me, he said quickly. Tell me where they are. Where they're not. For the first time, Sierra felt useful, no longer a burden. Her heart raced as she closed her eyes again, reaching into that strange sense. Left, she whispered, and he turned sharply, avoiding a path where shadows moved. Stop, she breathed, and he froze just before a hunter's trap hidden under rubble. Step by step, her guidance saved him from walking into death. The human realized her weakness was not weakness at all. It was a gift, a hidden strength no one had seen, not even her family who had abandoned her. They reached an old metro tunnel. Its mouth dark and gaping, the human slipped inside. Placing her gently on the ground, torches burned faintly deeper in the tunnel. Scavengers' campfires, he cursed softly. We can't go through. Too many of them. Sierra's voice came again, steady. No, they're sleeping. Their energy is faint, move quiet, we can pass, he hesitated, but trusted her, carrying her carefully. He crept through the shadows, every muscle tense. The glow of fire flickered against the walls, the sound of snoring men echoing. One wrong step would end them both. But Sierra's whisper guided him, slow. Now right. Stay close to the wall. And somehow they made it, unseen. When they reached the far end of the tunnel, the human stopped and set her down. He looked at her in disbelief, shaking his head. You saved us. Her eyes shone softly, filled with something she had not felt in years. Pride. Her lips curved into the faintest smile. Maybe I'm not useless after all. The human's voice softened. You never were, they just couldn't see it. But before the moment could settle, a roar shook the air behind them. One of the scavengers had woken, shouting, weapons clashing, voices rising. The tunnel exploded with noise, their cover broken. The human grabbed her quickly, running into the daylight behind them. The pursuit roared louder than ever, but this time, something was different. He was not running alone, he was running with a guide, a partner. A girl who had found her hidden strength as they disappeared into the ruins. Sierra whispered into his ear. They'll keep chasing, but I won't let them win. The human smiled grimly. Then neither will I. The bond between them had shifted. She was no longer just someone he carried. She was someone who could carry him too, in her own way and together. They were no longer prey, they were survivors. The ruins echoed with shouts. The scavenger gangs had discovered their trail, and the sound of pursuit grew louder with every passing moment. The human ran through broken streets, his breath harsh, his arms holding Sierra close. She guided him with her strange gift, whispering directions in his ear. Left. Faster. Stop. 3 ahead. Each word saved them from ambush, but the hunters were too many, and escape could not last forever. At last they reached the edge of the city. There stood the gates of an abandoned factory, its walls tall and rusted, its windows shattered. The human pushed inside, searching desperately for cover. He set Sierra down behind a pile of crates, his eyes scanning the shadows. This is it, he muttered, gripping his broken tool as if it were a blade. They'll corner us here, Sierra's glowing eyes fixed on him. Fear and strength mixed in her gaze. You can't fight them all, she whispered. The human gave a sharp smile. I don't need to fight them all. I just need to fight long enough. The door burst open, and scavengers poured in. Dozens of them, their faces hard, their weapons gleaming in the dim light. Their leader, a tall man with scars across his face, stepped forward, his voice echoed in the factory. Give us the girl, scavenger, and maybe we'll let you crawl away alive. The human stood tall, his chest rising with steady breaths. His voice was calm but unshakable. She's not yours anymore. Laughter spread through the gang, cruel and mocking. You think you can stop us with that piece of junk in your hand? One sneered, raising a jagged blade. The human didn't answer. Instead, he moved fast, swinging his tool with surprising force. The first attacker dropped, stunned by the blow. Chaos erupted. Shouts filled the air. Weapons clashed against metal. The human fought with raw fury, blocking, striking, never stepping back. But there were too many, and soon blades cut across his arm. Blood staining his sleeve, Sierra watched, her heart screaming in her chest. She closed her eyes, reaching deep into her strange power. She felt the sparks of energy around her, the hum of weapons, the glow of machines, the rhythm of men's bodies. With a cry, she pushed, her mind striking like lightning suddenly. The scavengers' weapons flickered. Machines shorted out, sparks flying in their hands. The gang shouted in panic, What's happening? The humans seized the moment, striking harder, driving them back step by step. But the leader remained, his scarred face twisting in rage. You think you can win, human? She's broken, useless. And now you're broken too. He charged forward, swinging a heavy iron bar. The human met him head-on, blocking with his tool. The clash ringing through the factory, they fought in a storm of metal and fists. Each strike louder, each blow harder. The leader was stronger. But the human fought with something more than strength. He fought with purpose. He knew if he fell, Sierra would be dragged back to the scrapyard, left to rot again, and that thought lit a fire inside him. With a final roar, the human slammed his tool against the leader's weapon. Breaking it in half, the scarred man stumbled back, shock in his eyes, but before he could recover, Sierra cried out, her power flaring. The machines around them groaned and collapsed, the lights flickering out. The leader fell to his knees, clutching his head. Overwhelmed by the sudden force, silence fell. Broken only by the humans' heavy breaths, the scavengers who remained stared in shock, fear replacing cruelty. One by one, they turned and fled into the night, leaving their leader broken on the floor. The human dropped his weapon. Blood dripping from his wounds, he staggered to Sierra's side, his face pale but his eyes burning with life. She looked up at him, tears streaming. You didn't give up. He knelt beside her, his voice weak but steady. Neither did you. The factory was ruined. But in that moment, it felt like a battlefield won, not by strength alone, but by something greater, trust, sacrifice, and a hidden bond between them. Sierra touched his injured arm gently, her glowing eyes soft. You risked everything for me, she whispered. He gave a faint smile, and I'd do it again. Outside, the night grew quiet. The scavengers were gone, but the world would not forgive easily. More danger would come, more enemies would rise, yet for now, they had stood together and they had not fallen. The final stand was not the end. It was only the beginning. And as the human lifted her once more, both knew the fight for survival was far from over. But together, they had proven something no one believed, that even the broken could rise and even the weak could win. The factory lay silent after the storm of battle. The floor was littered with broken weapons, scattered scraps and blood. The human leaned against the wall, his chest rising and falling with heavy breaths, his arm still bleeding from deep cuts, but his eyes never left Sierra, who lay wrapped in his jacket. Her glowing lines dim but steady. For the first time, she was not afraid, not abandoned. She had someone beside her. The human moved to her side and crouched, his hand brushing dust from her cheek. You held them back, he whispered, his voice rough but filled with pride. Sierra's lips trembled, her voice small. I tried, I didn't want them to hurt you. He smiled faintly. You did more than try, you saved us. Tears welled in her eyes. But these were not tears of pain, they were tears of relief, of hope she had thought she'd never feel again. Her family had thrown her away like trash, left her to rot in the scrapyard, yet here was a man, a stranger, bleeding and broken, who had refused to let her go. The night grew quiet outside, the city ruins holding their breath. The scavenger gangs had fled, but the human knew they would return one day. The galaxy was cruel, and word would spread that he had taken something valuable. Still, when he looked at Sierra, weak yet shining, he felt something stronger than fear, purpose. He lifted her once more, his body aching but his resolve unshaken. We can't stay here, he muttered. They'll come back stronger, with more men. Sierra rested her head against his shoulder, whispering, Then where will we go? His answer came slowly but with quiet certainty. Somewhere they won't find us. Somewhere you're not seen as broken. Somewhere you're free. The journey out of the city began before dawn. The streets were cold and empty, the sky painted with faint colors of sunrise. Each step hurt, but the human walked steady. Sierra felt every movement, every drop of blood soaking his sleeve, and her chest ached with guilt. You shouldn't carry me. You'll die like this, she whispered. He shook his head firmly. No, I live because I carry you. For hours they traveled through ruins, avoiding patrols, crossing fallen bridges. Sierra used her gift to guide him, sensing distant sparks of energy, leading him away from danger. Though her body was weak, her spirit grew stronger with every choice she made to protect him. And he too began to see her not as a burden, but as a partner, someone who gave him strength when he had none left. At last they reached the hills beyond the dead city. There, under the open sky, the air was cleaner, the ground less broken. The human set her down on a blanket, collapsing beside her for the first time. They both breathed without fear. Sierra looked at him, her glowing eyes soft. "You could have left me so many times, yet you stayed," she said quietly. He turned his head toward her, his face tired but calm. "Because you're worth it." Her lips curved into a fragile smile, one that lit her whole face. "No one ever said that to me before," she whispered. The human reached out, resting his hand gently over hers. "Then let me be the first." The wind carried silence between them, but it was not an empty silence. It was warm, filled with unspoken promises. In that moment, Sierra realized she was no longer a piece of scrap. No longer forgotten, she was alive and someone had chosen her. As the sun rose higher, painting the ruins gold, the human pulled himself to his feet. He looked out at the horizon, his voice low but steady. "This is not the end, Sierra. This is the beginning." She lifted her head slightly, hope glowing in her eyes. "A new beginning?" He nodded, for both of us behind them. The city still waited, dangerous and cruel. The gangs would return, her family might come searching, and the galaxy would not forgive. But ahead lay roads unwalked, places unknown, and a future not yet written. And though the world was heavy with shadows, the two of them carried a light no one could steal. The light of kindness, of courage, of a bond forged in fire and pain. As the human lifted her once more, the hills echoing with the first songs of morning, Sierra whispered with a trembling smile, "I thought I was left to die. But you gave me life again." He held her close, his voice firm, "And I'll keep giving it, as long as I breathe." Together they walked into the dawn, not as broken pieces, not as prey, but as survivors, partners in a new story, a story that had only just begun.